Mosaic warfare, transforming multi-domain operations for the next-gen defense space. This session convenes experts to examine the integration of advanced technologies in Mosaic warfare and multi-domain operations empowered by space technologies. Focusing on artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics, and autonomous system, the panel will explore how these innovations are reshaping defense strategies. Discussion will highlight the real-time, data-driven decision-making across land, maritime, air, space, and cyberspace to achieve the decision superiority and operational agility. The session will address implication for force design and command and control processes in contested environment. To chair the session and moderate the same, may I please call upon Lieutenant General Dr. PJS Pannu, PVSM, AVSM, VSM retired PSG, and the Senior Advisor, SIA-INDIA, on the stage. May I also call upon the panelist of the session, Commodore S.K. Pujari, Chief Technology Advisor, C2C Advanced Systems. Dr. Sahoo, CAIR, DRDO. Mr. Sai Krishna, CEO, Saptang Labs. Colonel Rajneesh Rally, retired VP Growth Operation, Dhruv Space. And Major General Rakesh Pandey, Corps of Signals. Over to you, Chair.
I was just looking at the time. It is just to say good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is the first session, really, of DefSAT 25. And what we had decided was that when we discuss multi-domain operations, of course, you know, those multi-domain operations are now completely countable, and we can talk about what domains are we talking about. But what is important is, how do you make sure that all these domains are aggregated? As the technology is making sure that human is slowly being either replaced, supplemented or complemented, the human in the chain would remain, because after all, it is the human mind and it is the human ability to decide and act based on the inputs that we receive from various terrestrial, non-terrestrial, or any inputs which are even human in nature, the human int, OSINT, all put together, have to be brought in together. And if they bring them all together, they are for terrestrial, non-terrestrial, for the sea, for the aerospace, all the senses are going to be working together. So literally speaking, in all that we talk about, the ISR is extremely important. And when you talk about the ISR, you're talking about the sensors of different kinds, which is Earth observation, electronic sensors, which are also giving a feed on the electronic intelligence. So largely, as was being spoken this morning, the DG DSA had mentioned about the non-kinetic attribute, that is the cyber and the space, possibly would be a lead in the warfare, because you may not even go kinetic, you may not even have the land warfare to start with. You can just have the cyber, and then at the end of it you find that the two nations have gone to war and we have started destroying through cyber kills, where cyber is also being weaponized. It is also global common. But cyber is really the fifth domain. But before that is the fourth domain, that is the space. And space and cyber put together have come together and they become partners. If they become partners, obviously they will defend one another, they will supplement one another, and together they will actually be able to bring all the domains together. The cyber can bring all the domains together. the space can bring all the domains together. So if we bring all these domains together, how is a human mind going to use that kind of ability to comprehend what these multi-senses from terrestrial and non-terrestrial sources are bringing to the console? And how are we going to fight a war where you are actually physically not there? If it is a non-kinetic, non-contact, so it means you're talking about a stand-off warfare. Even the industry can participate. The scientific community can participate. You don't have to be wearing a uniform and be eyeball to eyeball with a soldier. You are actually shooting from a distance. Even if it comes to kinetic, you can still shoot from a distance because, you have the ICBMs, the missiles going, the hypersonics are, going all over. Then you have the counter space technologies and counter missile technologies, which will be there to defend your aerospace or space and also the land. So therefore, the number of elements put together brings the whole of nation coming in. So when you talk about the multi-domain operations, the highest form of multi-domain operations is the decision maker, that is the CCS, where literally the defense minister, the finance minister, the home minister, and the foreign minister, of course, with the prime minister, they all sit together, and the security agencies, you have the advisory board giving a secretarial support. That is the highest form of multi-domain operations. The whole of the nation has to come together. Then it comes to the defense forces. And defense forces, of course, you have Army, Navy, Air Force. But in the Army, Navy, Air Force, you have the cyber and the space, which are actually now making their own space to get into the front line. So really speaking, the space is now becoming the foremost domain because it can bring the cyber and the other three domains of warfare together. What is important here is that if you have to take a decision, we are looking at two things: speed of decision making, the accuracy of decision making, and the economy of effort, economy of decision making, and also economy of war fighting. If we are going to make sure that we are taking the right decision, but we should also take a decision within the combinations which get autonomously suggested, which is the cheapest way to win a war. The cheapest way to win a war is to win a war before you go to war. And the most expensive way to win a war is that try to win a war after going to war and let the outcomes decide, how then you can never decide. So therefore, you have to win a war before you go to war. And unless you understand that how the aggregation of technology is going to make you fight a stand-off warfare where industry and the scientific community has got a huge role to play. So therefore, today what we are talking about is actually in this session the culmination of the MDO. And why we are talking about the culmination of the MDO discussion to happen right in the beginning, because from here, when we talk about the Mosaic warfare, we are talking about the data, you are talking about the AI, you are talking about various modules which will function together, will bring all the attributes of three domains plus two domains together. Then we start talking about each domain one after one. So we are going to be talking about the maritime forces, we're talking about the aerospace, we're going to talk about the land forces, and we're going to talk about homeland security. And then ultimately, what we are discussing now, we will see the result of it in the in-space exercise that is going to happen on the 10th. So I have a very bright and well-informed panel with me. I would introduce them as and when I get them to speak. But more than anything else it is not going to be a discourse, where a speaker just speaks. I think we are going to have a discussion. And therefore, when we have a discussion, I will first introduce Major General Rakesh Pandey. Of course, at the moment, he's temporarily based here because today itself he's taking a flight to Calcutta, where he's taking over as the Chief Signal Officer of the Eastern Command. He has been a distinguished, experienced officer in the field of electronic warfare. He also was part of DRDO, which later on became the Defense Cyber Agency, and I had the privilege to know him not only through our professional DRDO and Cyber Agency time, but he also served in my own battalion, 22 Maratha Light Infantry. So when we talk about non-kinetic warfare, that should we not actually start fighting the kinetic battle? I would want to know from Major General Rakesh Pandey, how do you think the cyber and the space combined, or the electronic warfare, will help to win a war by creating a web kill chain, and how you can defeat a web kill chain just in case the web kill chain is created by the adversary? How do you discern that the enemy has created the web kill chain? And how do you break the web kill chain of the enemy and yet create your own and be successful in implementing it? So let's have views of Rakesh.
Thank you, sir. Am I audible? When we are talking about power and influence, I want to begin with a shlok, which actually will convey maybe few pages. So whenever we are thinking about a particular domain, who is the leader, who is the follower? So I am reminded of a shlok, many of you would have heard it. Na avisheko na sanskara, singhasya kriyate bane, vikramarjit satvasya swayameva mringendrata. A lion does not require a coronation, does not require consecration. It becomes king on its own power. So here in this, whenever we are talking about the global power equation, you will get the status that you deserve. There are certain parameters which will dictate where you stand in the pecking order. We are into 3 continuums, sir. The world wants to be in the continuum of cooperation. Cooperation soon turns into competition. Competition degenerates into conflict, and sometimes the conflict goes beyond the red line and gets converted into war. This is the cycle which we have been witnessing. Earlier, the war could be decisive, conclusive. You will know who is the victor, who is the vanquished. The victor will write new rules and the vanquished will follow. That will be the global order. What we see now is not like that. Wars are getting prolonged and unending. It is not ending. Earlier, we used to hear 100-year war, 30-year war. So we have come back to that era because the technology is not concentrated in just a few power. Last around 10, 20 years, there are more countries who have staked their claim in how the technology will come up, how it will spread, and who will have the monopoly. In this, I just wish to declutter what we are talking about when we talk about multi-domain operation, just the hierarchy of conflict. At the highest end of it is the war. The ways and means of war is called warfare. A war is comprised of multiple operations. Now in these operations there are domains. How the domains get constituted? So we have traditional dimensions, which were 5, and with the addition of cyber it became 6. So these are your kind of dimensions which are also domains. And then because of the technology, you have got about 10, 12 more domains for nuclear, chemical, swarm. These are the technology-driven domains. And they form the tiles of the mosaic. So when you decided that simultaneously you need multi-domain, you started combining it. So what began with the joint operation got transformed into multi-domain operations, and then it was realized that even it is not good enough. So the researchers and scholars and military generals, commanders, they work together, and this is the concept which US has thrown. What we require to do is to just understand the concept and make it bespoke for ourselves. Not every conflict will require all the domains. So if we have the ability to find out which are the critical domains that we need to apply in a particular conflict, we will be doing very well for ourselves. And as we have discussed earlier, the wisdom lies in not having to test these kind of destructive domains. and make do with the non-destructive, non-kinetic domains. Because ultimately, if you get into that, you are pushing yourself behind. I am not saying for you to be not getting into it, you will have to acquire capability continuously. I will give you an example of our northern adversary. It has got no record of getting into war for howsoever back you can go. These conflicts have been mainly, their conflicts have been mainly internal, but last 25, 30 years, every year it adds on to its capability. And that is what is required. If you want to avoid a war, you will have to prepare for war. And that is why, without getting into that, what is the requirement of it? If you are doing it, you are keeping the war away from you. That is where we need to see. Now, why two aspects that I will discuss in this, while every other aspects were well known and traditional. When the cyber and space got added into it, it became almost like what you cannot visualize. And when I talk about space, I will just give you in 1 or 2 sentences what the space means. Till now, there are almost 60,000 objects, man-made objects, which have been thrown into the space, out of which 28,000 are active. And what is our share? So if we can track what these 27 objects are doing, you will have the space situational awareness. If you know how it is controlled, all these objects, through spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum, every object of it, almost half of them are for the purpose of communication, telemetry, research, and some of them are unknown. But command and control of all of this object is through some spectrum, some frequency. If you can find out what is this frequency is, you can target it. So you, at one end is the technology, at one end is the counter or anti-technology. So both have to be developed simultaneously. Now out of this, if I know this, and whenever I try to find out that what is it, there is, you know that there is a kinetic means to target a particular space object, but that will precipitate a definite war. What countries do? They go into this kind of non-kinetic, and almost 80% of it is related to spectrum. That is where I was saying, or Sir was saying, that this spectrum is one of the most potent integrator of all the 20-25 domains that I have talked. And if I know how they are getting integrated, I can target them very well. Another aspect is of cyber. Now it has grown to the extent that it has become a space in itself. It has become a dimension. So how you can have a say? It is getting fragmented. The countries are securing itself so that it can punch the adversary and safeguard itself from adversary punching it. Same thing has to be tackled by us. Now when we are talking about such a complex setup, it is the command and control and the commander who is sitting on top of it. You know, I was just comparing what is the memory space of a human mind. And I was surprised to know that a single individual's memory space is more than what Microsoft's data center is taking to process the entire thing of the world. The Microsoft's data centers has 2 petabytes, whereas a human memory's capacity is 2.5 petabytes. So just you can imagine how important the human brain is. And when you are talking about all these technologies, I found that it is the brain science, apart from whatever you are doing, which will dictate who is the winner and who is able to just pin down the adversary. Now, a command and control setup and a commander. Just imagine if someone hacks or someone disables the mind of the commander. All your setup is, whatever you have spent is going to be reduced in efficiency by a percentage that you have not settled for. So in all, if we have to do and be a leader in this kinds of complex thing, we have to know just 3-4 things, and that is where my expectation from the industry is. What is the IPR that you have? how many products, what is the share that you have in the global export market. Now the era of military giving the GSQR and you trying to make a prototype and product, this luxury of time is not there. So you being the more wise, more knowledgeable in the domain, you have to come up with what the GSQR should be. You have to match your products with the global products in a manner that we don't have to look for. We have to choose from these products and do not confine it to just your own country. Take global space as a market for it. That is when it will become sustainable. If you give me a product after 3 years, by the time when I procure it, it would have become obsolete. So for the scientific community, for the research community, for the production agency, you have to now get moving to make sure that you match up with the time. Otherwise, we see that there are 3-4 countries which have just taken off. And if we are not able to reduce the gap, whatever we are talking about it, we will not be able to bridge the gap and be counted as one of the leaders. So that is, sir, where I will end. And I hope that we are able to move. I am very happy to see this kind of collaboration. I have personally, having been in various kinds of domain and various kinds of role, have been wanting to have just this face-to-face with those who are going to implement it. And I'm saying time has come when the warriors have to be scientist grade and scientists have to be warrior grade. The line between the civil and military has blurred, and blurred so much that you have to forget the distinction and collaborate, sit together and make sure that you are able to outsmart, outwit and outdo your adversary. That is when there is no second position in war and conflict. We have to combine ourselves and make sure that we come first in all future conflicts.
General Rajesh, thank you. Rakesh, thank you very much. As I was mentioning, that it appears to be a conclusive session, and I think that is how we designed it. That first we conclude and then we start discussing this. And thank you for reposing trust in the industry. And I think the scientific community, as was said by Anil in the morning, the industry is ready. And I think we just need to collaborate. I'll now go to Colonel Rajneesh Relly. He is the veteran and also president of growth operations of Dhruva Space. Now, as Rakesh was talking about the tiles of Mosaic warfare, can space be considered as one of the tiles, or it can take all the tiles of Mosaic warfare into it when you talk about space operations? So can you please link up how the space, the standoff warfare and the war of spectrum and destruction through the web kill chains that General Rakesh was talking about, how do you think the space will empower that kind of a standoff warfare?
So thank you, sir. I think a lot has been spoken since morning on what space brings to the table when we talk about Mosaic warfare and multi-domain operations. Personally, I see it as a two-pronged thing. Firstly, space enables all other forms, all other domains, including Mosaic warfare. It brings to value 3 basic things: PNT, surveillance, and communication. These 3 things enable all the tenets that we have spoken of in the strategy of Mosaic warfare and MDO. The second part, given its importance, which again has been spoken of, space itself has become a contested sort of area, where it is reached, there are countries which are developing capabilities to contest the use by adversaries, use space effectively, and yet retain their own ability to use space. Now, keeping in mind this domain, which has become a contested domain, it is important for us to be able to develop space operations in a manner so that we could retain our ability to use space for whatever purposes we need to in support of other domains and by itself. Now, coming on to space operations, to my mind, there are 2 basic tenets when we look at space operations. First and foremost is situational awareness. That comes from SSA, Space Situational Awareness, presently a very infrastructure heavy, costly thing that to put in place everything to achieve a full SSA. So I think, as is the case in the moment, it is presently a more of a collaborative thing that is ongoing, whereas a SSA is being achieved not independently by any country, but we have a collaborative effort, of course, with the Americans leading the way. Future technology we are talking about space-based SSA coming in, will develop, give us much better. Better now? So space-based SSA should give us much better capabilities when we look at situational awareness of the space domain itself. The other part that comes in, again, is critical, is data management and decision taking in the space domain. This needs to be enabled by AI/ML and various other cutting-edge technologies. To my mind, there are 4 cutting-edge technologies we should be looking at to enable smooth conduct of space operations with the aim to retain our ability to use the domain effectively with a defensive or even offensive intent. The technologies that we should be looking at AI/ML, machine learning. We should be looking at models trained to detect, predict satellite behaviors, predict space weather, to predict failures so that rectification can be done. The next thing we should be looking at, automation and autonomous systems. Assets in space need to be enabled with AI and ML on board to be able to take evasive actions in face of offensive activity by the adversary. They should be able to carry out some repair, post-damage. We should have the ability to reconfigure your space assets for different missions. Satellite maneuverability is something which will happen. We have the Chinese and the Americans talking about it, to move to a different orbit and deliver data or surveillance to meet the tenets of, suppose, multi-domain operations or mosaic warfare. We should be able to move these autonomous systems to the place and deliver data where we require it. Lastly, as a binding thing to the whole space operation network that we have, would be secure communication. We need secure communication to ensure data integrity is maintained, because any data integrity lost in the space and as and when it gets into the network will spoil the complete system. So that, to my mind, are the 4 technologies that we should be looking at to ensure our space operations carry on unhindered. That's it.
I think it was a very nice rally between Rajneesh and Rakesh, Colonel Rally. Thank you very much. I think from the standoff warfare, building a web kill chain, to how the space actually makes a military layer out of it, because every layer in the mosaic warfare has to be of a particular kind. You have a non-kinetic electronic warfare in which spectrum is used, and you have the space which comes in and does whatever which is non-terrestrial and brings it back to the same additional military layer. Between self and CAIR, we have been talking about a lot that can be done in mosaic warfare. I have been in touch with Dr. Rituraj, who was supposed to be here, and Dr. Rakshit will be here. He's also participating in the war game. Today, the CAIR DRDO is being represented by Dr. Sahoo. And Dr. Sahoo will take us through the AI-enabled mosaic warfare using spatial grasp technologies. And I suppose you will continue in the same way, the way the 2 speakers have very briefly touched upon, that how are you going to build the mosaic for the space and even for multi-domain operations, including the non-terrestrial. So let's hear your views.
Thank you, sir. Hello. Yeah. Thank you, sir. So now, when I will talk about like the traditional warfare to mosaic warfare, so in between we have to travel through the command and control and then autonomous systems. So in traditional warfare, what happens, like the decision is taken by the commander of the human, and the
You need to bring your mic close.
yeah, and the machines are also human operated. So it is comparatively simpler. and but when it comes to multi-domain operations, and then it will be amalgamation of like different when it is going to like the land, sea, or air force, or cyber or space. So what happens when it will be like the decision making by partly by the AI-driven softwares, because these decision depends on the passive sensors like the images or voice or text. From there it will be taken, and the final decision will be taken by the human. But all these things also, when we travel to the next autonomous navigations. So what happens like these now when the war is going on, there will be some of the systems will be there. There will be like attacks will be through the different weapons, where maybe it will be manned or unmanned weapons will be there. So what happens in this scenario, we have to take care of the active sensors, like what is going on there. So these active sensors, it may be like from GPS or IMU, or maybe some cameras mounted on some of the autonomous systems, like what is going on, maybe are the weaponized. So what is real time is happening, like that decisions are also required to be there. So what happens now when it is coming to the graph technology, what happens, it is like have to propagate it like locally first to assess what is going on with the both from the active and passive sensors. Like it comparatively expands and coming to the next, like covering and then exploring the neighborhoods, like what is going on, and slowly it is explored and going on there. So now depends on an objective that has to be find out, like when it has to be like the neighbor, or it will be like taking the help from others. So now whether it has to be like covering one area, or there have to be like some danger zone is there that has to be identified, or there have to be like that cover up some destruction up there, something is happening there. So all these three happens like when there will be lot of like autonomous systems will be there, and then a lot of active and passive sensors are there. So it will be very difficult for the human to take a decisions. So in that scenario, it has to be AI/ML has to be like much advanced. It has to be there, and then the decisions are depends on that.
Thank you, Dr. Sahoo. What I understand from you is that when you are looking at space, you are trying to bring the communication, ISR, PNT all put together, and have all the sensors come together and integrate.
Yes, sir.
But you know, it's very important for us that how do you write those algorithms? How do you create codes? How do you make sure that all these platforms understand each other?
Yes.
Because to make them understand each other, you have to put them on a common language. And that common language can only be written provided you know how the effect-based operations will be implemented by the commanders. So let me go on to Mr. Sai Krishna. If you really look at him, he is the CEO of Saptang Labs, but his past is that he is a former IRS officer, and he's also worked in the NTRO, so he's got a past in the revenue services. He was a bureaucrat, then he became a technocrat, and now he's become an entrepreneur. Sai, can I please hear from you? How would you achieve this data integration? How do you write the algorithm? How do you use the AI and the LLMs for building this kind of a web chain so that it is secure, it is yours, it cannot be tampered with, nobody is fighting your war, or nobody is hijacking you, and nobody is making sure nobody can use your own warriors against you. Can you please give us some beyond that? Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to speak in front of General Pannu, who has been pioneering this very interesting concept of mosaic warfare in India. I'd like to draw a simple analogy. Like Industry 4.0 is a very common phrase everybody is familiar with. Now, I would say if you draw a similar analogy towards the defense, that would be mosaic warfare. I'm not talking about the warfare point of view that the soldier would see, but from the industry point of view, just try to understand what mosaic warfare literally is. Extensive use of IoT, extensive use of blockchain, and extensive use of AI. All trying to make sense. All trying to make sense together to give a person a perspective. Now, in the IoT, in the Industry 4.0 concept, why do we have a separate blockchain? Why do we have AI? Machines are continuously updating and reporting their data. Now that data is overwhelming to the factory manager. Like a machine is reporting, I'm moving from point A to point B. Okay, good. You're supposed to do that. Same way, another machine is saying, I'm coming to point C. Now you're supposed to pick up something from point B. Okay, great. So this information is flooding the factory manager. Now we put AI models to ensure that this information is efficiently managed in the factory without any involvement of the factory manager till the point there is a red flag. On a similar analogy, what we expect is now the industry or the military IoT things which are deployed. Now the battlefield is going to be full of sensors. It could be on space, off the space, it could be devices. Everything is transmitting continuously. Its data points, its locations and everything. And now that data is overwhelming to the battle commander or even the person who's sitting in the field. Now how does it deal with it? This is probably what the bigger challenge is and what AI can do to handle this. Now like a factory, the factory manager doesn't really have a lot of autonomy to decide. He gets a battle plan, he's supposed to execute the battle plan. Now, if we can cleverly figure out a way to convert the battle plan into a model or a document that the machine can make sense of, then machine can significantly reduce the decision fatigue that the commander would go through. So what I'm imagining is something like this. There is a battle plan. The document will be written in simple plain English with specific codes written for each of the scenarios and fed to the machine. Now today we have large language models. Large language models make sense of this, convert each battle plan. Let us say retain position A at all costs. And the units that are deployed are A, B, C, D, E. Let's call them S1, S2, S3. Now the model will be able to make sense and say retain at all costs means S1 will defend this location at all costs. S2 will move back and support S1. S3 will provide, let's say, logistic supply or communication supply or drone supply or footage, whatever. Now the machine is able to translate this command, defend at all costs, into these decisions, series of decisions, and communicate. So this is probably the way, sir, the battlefield commander can remain sane and can ensure that the battle plan that is handed over to him is executed perfectly. Now, yes, we have certain technical challenges like the large language models come with hallucinations. And second part, another major challenge that we see is how do we even perceive and execute? So this central engine is what we call as the joint domain operations, or what I think I would call as MDC2, which is what word that is used in the American space, multi-domain command control. Now it is a primary responsibility of multi-domain command control to achieve this. Now I would say the multi-domain command control does largely 4 things, which covers up the scenarios that Sir has asked me to comment on, which is why I'm talking about this. The first one is identifying the enemy and its intent of their units. Now imagine it like a chessboard, literally like a chessboard. Now you're trying to figure out where the pawns of enemy are. Obviously not everything you can see. Some of them you can see, some of them you can't see. And you also have some sense of assessment of where you are. Now you're also aware where your units are on the chessboard, and you also know something about your own units. And there is already a predetermined role, responsibility for each of the units. And they also have relationships. Like for example, one of the unit cannot move unless until there is a sufficient air cover. One unit cannot move unless until there is supply. So there are restraints and constraints also between them and relationships between them. So now you have to impose these roles, responsibilities on the awareness that you have department. Now again here AI can help, because most of these are traditional, standard and commonly understood. Even the terrain is more or less the same, and the battle plan is more or less the same. Scenarios, model already knows. So it will be able to make some sense of the flow. Now the next thing would be implementing rules and constraints. The tanks can't climb mountains. So some simple rules like this. Now the drones that currently we have cannot go beyond line of sight. So they cannot go on the other side of the mountain and do any activity. So these are the restraints and constraints that you have to deploy on the data. Now once you deploy all these things, now it's a simulation, it's a video game as far as the AI model is concerned. Now the AI model is able to make sense of the battle plan received, generate, convert them into instructions, and transmit these instructions to respective units, thereby significantly reducing the workload or the cognitive load that the battle commander would experience, and yet giving him information that he can communicate to his boss. Are we in control? Are we not in control? Are we losing? Are we winning? So this is one scenario. Now in this scenario, the most important item is we are all presumed that the communications that happen between the units posted, the field units, and the battle commander is safe and secure. Now that's a very big if. Like what Sir has been talking and my other co-panelists have been talking. It's a very, very big if. Now how do we do this? Now this is where we are working on a very interesting technology to identify devices using their radio fingerprints. Now you are able to uniquely identify a device using the way the radio fingerprinting happens. Now you have first sense, yes, this is my device, and this device is responding to me, and you have your own algorithm to verify if this device is in a state of active war, active usage. It could be your device, but not active. Maybe it has some spare parts missing, or it has lost its mobility. Or this device can act as a command control local. Because at the end of the day, you can't control everything sitting in the battlefield. Now, you need local command controls too. It can command, interact with them. Or you can also update the status as this device is destroyed, taken over by the enemy, or at risk of being taken over by the enemy. So now you see, as a battlefield commander, you have certain risk elements which are coming from the cyberspace, because all your communications are happening via cyberspace. Now you also have to interact and identify how the devices are being used by your manned or unmanned units. Now again, you can deploy behavioral analytics. You can have a certain methodology in which they can identify themselves using biometrics, or your people who are operating and using. So there will be some behavioral anomalies, like you are not supposed to activate in this sequence or activate in that sequence. Those type of things you can again deploy. Again, there you can have AI to take care of most of the responsibilities. And another last thing, sir, that I would like to comment on. Like I said, there are thousands of sensors. Each sensor is communicating and transmitting. Now, how do we convert all of this into information? Like I draw the example of a factory. Now we only look at anomalies. Now today, AI models are decent enough to figure out anomalies. Now a radar, let's say, is transmitting continuously to this engine. Now this engine has a sensor which has a processing engine which just looks at, okay, did I find any device? Yes, there is a new device on the radar screen. A new object is identified. Second, is it mine or not? Or undetermined state. Undetermined state, approaching fast. Flag it to command control. Now all the communications can be converted into a specific machine-based language, which again, you can use AI/ML to manage it. So there is a normalized format with which all the alerts are received by the command control, processed by the command control, first according to the existing battle plan fed to it. And whenever the command control fails, or there is a human element, let's say, for example, one of the unit wants to change the plan. Now the command control doesn't need battle commander's permission to say, no, please proceed. He says, no, please escalate. This plan won't work. Change. Now that only those scenarios can be highlighted to the battlefield commander for his decisions and communicated back. Again, see, we are fusing AI, IoT, IMOT rather, and at the same time, probably we will use a blockchain to ensure that all these devices are connected actively and managed efficiently without intervention. And on the top of it, use these cyberspace protection to do. I think that would be a good scenario, sir.
Thank you very much. You actually transported me into a battlefield where a lot of autonomous work is happening, a lot of machines are at work, all of them are very sincere to you. You also spoke about a tank, which is also a platform. I think internally the platforms have to talk within, and internally platforms have to also talk outside. Like, for example, a squadron of tanks or a troop of tanks, have to come together. You also spoke about the ability of a tank to climb or not climb a mountain. So, for example, a sensor can tell you from where a tank can climb a mountain. In fact, we have General Brard here, who actually designed a tank which can climb a mountain. So I suppose if those sensors are given to them, like a human being, it'll tell you that this is how the tank is going to operate. You also brought a very important aspect of multi-domain command and control. The command and control of a platform within, the command and control of a group of machines, and command and control of large formations put together. I think that is what you have been talking about, which is secure. And you can write and rewrite programs. You can get up in the morning and you can actually redesign and reconfigure your entire strategy and plan with very little, because the data has been fed into it. So I suppose it's got a lot to do with data. So since you talk about the multi-domain command and control, I go to C2, the command and control advanced systems. We have Commodore Pujari here, who's former VESI, They've also been working on the combat management system. They've been working on how to make sure that there is a systematic architectural approach to building the military layers for Mosaic warfare. Do I have to repeat what I said? I don't know. Okay. So, sorry, I lost my voice. I didn't know. But the multi-domain command and control is in the domain of C2C advanced systems, and Commodore Pujari, I request you to cover the C4 ISR systems for the multi-domain operations and in command and control. That how do you bring all those multiple aspects that Sai has spoken about or the earlier speakers have spoken about. Now imagine you're a commander. How do you take a decision? How do you fight a battle and make sure that what you see on your console is the same what is being executed on ground, and how do you modify it? After that, I'm going to actually leave the house open for questioning any of these experts. So in next 5 minutes, if you can just cover your aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the brief introduction, and I hope it is okay, audible? Okay. I think we have seen sufficiently the complexities involved in multi-domain operations, Mosaic warfare, or if you go one step further, the combination thereof of these two dimensions. Now, my question is, or my starting point is that all this is good enough or well, but how do you bring all these things together? Now, I'm going to talk about an approach which realizes a system which is enabled for, say, multi-domain operations. What are the building blocks of such a system? And what are the prerequisites when you look at these building blocks? How do you operationalize them? Operationalize not in the sense of in actual operations, but making them working. So we start with an situational awareness system. The end result of a situational awareness system is to have a common operation pictures. Now this common operation picture obviously has to come from the sensors, whether they are conventional sensors like radar. In Navy we have sonars, then EW is common for all three forces, and so on and so forth. Nowadays there are a lot of autonomous sensors also available to the commanders. So my definition of the first building block, it is, I'm sorry to use the word my, but the definition that I like to propose for the building block for the common is an ability to collate an operational picture or a common operation picture, what we call as COP, at an appropriate level of command hierarchy. Now what is this appropriate level? That is where the whole architectural approach comes into picture. This appropriate level, fortunately for Navy and Air Force, is simpler in the sense that we talk about integrating a whole ship so that the ship can give you a common operation picture, or an aircraft, a fighter aircraft. That becomes the first building block at that level. In Army, the things are more tricky, so we can debate that point. I don't want to labor that point at this stage. But an appropriate level of command and control hierarchy where you can collate and common operation pictures given the resources of the sensors at your disposal. Then you add the decision system on top of it, where you can effectively utilize all your combat resources for engaging or for targeting, or whatever term one wants to use it. Now, my question is that how do you realize such a system? You will have resources available to you, but as the question was asked to Sai and he answered it, but that question I am answering in slightly different terms. When you start talking about a building block as a C4 ISR system at an appropriate level of, I'm sorry I'm using this term, at appropriate level of command and control hierarchy repeatedly, because that is most crucial aspect of it. Because if you get that right, or if we get that right, then rest of the things will follow very, very smoothly. So, what is your approach to realize such a system? Which also can be called as a system of systems, because they are systems which are interfaced to such a system. Now, the first point, therefore, is your approach towards realizing a command and control system, or call it C4 ISR system, and whatever resources are given you at that level of command and control hierarchy. Now, such systems by definition are software-intensive systems. And how does one go about designing a software-intensive system? A software-intensive system needs an approach which is the life cycle approach. I have been very fortunate to be associated with VESI, and through VESI, it was an eye-opener to interact with few NATO countries as regards to design and development of C4 ISR systems. They do not talk anything beyond DRDO standards 2167 or MIL standard 498. That means each step, please understand I am getting into details which you may find scary, but they are not scary. There is a question of getting your act right in the very beginning. So they talk about an architectural approach driven by standards, where you start with concept of operations, system requirements, then the software architecture, hardware architecture, detailed design, then actual coding, then testing, then integration, so on and so forth. Now, how does these things become important? Because now you are approaching the entire endeavor in a very, very systematic manner. Now, just to give you an example, if I make a statement that no C4 ISR system, which is indigenous in nature, can be designed and developed without having an internal team of software engineers with the organization concerned, you will say that you are drawing impossible boundaries. But that is not the case, because we are an IT superpower, but your IT super kids will need how you want to do it. And they don't have the domain knowledge, so you have to guide them. And you can guide them only when you know the system architecture. It can't be in isolation. It can't be in silos. I'm just giving one aspect of it. The second aspect is that once you have a design and development approach, that design and development approach also guides your subsequent stages. For example, acquisition of new weapons and sensors. You will be dependent on OEMs. You will always be dependent on OEMs. But does the OEM give you full thing? But if you have an idea of how this particular component is going to talk to my system or being part of my system, then you will demand those communication protocols. General Pannu asked that question, that how does it talk? It talks because there is a common data structure. There is a common protocol that you have agreed upon. And they may have developed their system in isolation, independently, for some other country. Okay, when that comes to you, they have to be flexible enough, or you have to be flexible enough to interface. So there are time-proven, time-tested techniques of maybe you have an API-driven interface, or maybe you have driven an ICD-driven interface, but it is agreed during the contractual phase that your item will have to, or your resource will have to be talking to my overall system in this manner. So, Mosaic warfare, building blocks, which are C4 ISR, will have to be, you have to ensure that you have an approach, you have to have acquisition done in accordance with this approach. Thereafter comes the question of how do you take advantage of emerging AI/ML technologies. Once you have got the basic building block in place, then AI/ML technologies can be added. But please understand, I was looking at a pie chart yesterday in order to prepare for today's talk, and I was surprised that 80% of the efforts in a good proven ML system they go into the preparation of data. 80%. It is unbelievable, but this is true. Now, what is happening in our scenario? We have got excellent industry support as far as AI/ML developments are concerned. But they come to you with a solution which they have tried out on open source. With that solution they come, then they meet your data which is not prepared. No work has happened on that data. So the strategy then becomes that can you work independently on data? I was just looking at something which I had seen 4 years back, but I recently went back to it. What China is doing towards data preparation. There are workshops in villages where data annotation is taking place. They know nothing about AI/ML. They know nothing about mosaic warfare. They know nothing about net centricity, nothing. These are simple villagers who are educated only to use the annotation tool, and their job is only to prepare the annotated data. Now, there was a quote from a worker who was working on it. He says that I see myself as the bricklayer of the digital industry. My job is to lay the foundation level bricks. Organizations must prepare their data whether AI/ML solutions are coming or not coming in isolation. And annotation is actually something like a blessing, because even if no AI/ML solution comes, your analyst will automatically be benefited moment you have got an annotation pipeline in your organization. And tomorrow morning, if a guy comes at your door with a good solution and you say, your solution looks good, try it on my data. He or she doesn't have to struggle, or they don't have to struggle. They'll say, yes, prepared data is there, I'll test it out on my system. And then there is a retraining effort and all that. That is a given. That one should not be bothered about. So I think I've already taken enough time, more than 5 minutes. But all I'm saying is I'm sharing some of the complex challenges with you, and I will conclude something which I heard in one of the conferences way back in 2004, which was that technology today allows you to flatten the command structure. But that doesn't mean you should do it. I'll end with that.
Thank you, Commodore Pujari. Ladies and gentlemen, just keep it short. I have 2 minutes to go, and I can take 2 questions, and I can pinch some stomach time of yours just in case you decide so. So if you have any questions, kindly, we'll take all the questions. Okay, let me start with 2 questions. Yeah, Air Marshal Bedi. Anybody else asking a question? Okay, please.
Thank you, sir. Air Marshal Bedi, extremely useful session, sir. I'll just pick up a question taking 2 ends of the spectrum, figuratively as well as literally. What Mr. Sai Krishna drew an analogy what AI system can do. You know, it can help the commander. You yourself said OODA loop can be shortened. And Commodore Pujari talked about data. My simple question is, sir, that when you expect this AI system, which industry is developing to help the army, the commander, to take decision, broadly what kind of decision? Let's say whether to attack, not to attack, where to attack, and with what to attack, let's say broadly. Now what happens is, if this AI system is going to feed on data, like you said, is the army or are the armed forces ready to share that intricate data with the industry or with the open source? Because that is what it is going to decide based on, that what weapon system is capable of what. What are your strategies, what are your plans, what are your intricates? I mean, whatever we do in the absolutely 4 walls under lock and key is now going to be shared with everybody. So when are we going to be ready to do that, to have ultimate system which can help the commander? Thank you, sir.
Before I ask the experts to talk about it, only 2 things I'll say: that every military formation or every military does exercises, and they exercise the minds and they create a data. But that data is not a digital data, it's more analog data. And when personalities change, they also forget what somebody else, so new minds keep coming and new things keep happening. But at the end of it, what will happen is that these exercises are the ones which are going to create data within the organization. And that data, the algorithms are going to be written in a manner that you create your data, you get your decision out of it. It is not that the industry will create your data. The industry will not create your data. It will create you modules on which you feed your data cyclically through exercises. That is point number 1. Secondly, I think General Rakesh had mentioned it, that the industry and the scientific community are warriors. And I think this is where this combine is going to work together. If we don't combine, then nothing is going to happen, really. So I think together we have to work towards it. If there is anybody...
Sir, I just want to quickly say something. Sir, if you recall, I said some importance of internal teams. Now just imagine an internal team is there who know, the team knows what it entails. Now if you come with a solution, you would have obviously worked on a sample data, maybe open source data. The organizations must create space inside for you to test that with my data, that is the services data. That solves, and this practice has been implemented in NTRO as well as in Navy, along with TCS, to the extent of going to their premises and creating a segregated zone completely, where nothing comes out, nothing goes in, and you can always safeguard your data, where the ultimate responsibility is yours. Those guys come bare hand, no mobile, nothing, no physical checking, but it is solvable problem. It's not a difficult problem. But the data must be ready there. If it is not ready, then it is going to take time. That's all.
So just one moment to add, sir. So like everybody says, this is a digital transformation. So we need 3 changes. PPT, people, process, technology. Now people I believe are changing anyways. Now the challenge generally comes in collection of data because there is no process to collect that data. Now thankfully for us, when you replace the equipment, the new equipment that you get in, it naturally collects data and pushes data. So the data collection challenge becomes significantly reduced. Let me give an example, sir. Today we are talking about domain local command controls. What are local command controls? All the armed personnel carriers, they have a software-defined network embedded in it. Imagine it like this. Today, almost all the trucks that travel in India, all of them have a GPS sensor. Now, all what we are talking about is a little bit extension of it. Let's say, imagine the GPS sensor in the truck also extends a Wi-Fi. So people who are moving around it can connect to it, or they can be tracked. Now that data is anyways getting collected and sent to the center. Now data is completely within your control. And all the MDCT solutions or any other solution that we are talking about, with what Pujari sir is saying, all of them are built completely for offline networks. There is no question of internet connectivity coming at all in this. Even the large language models, autonomous engines, everything we talk and deploy, everything is completely off-grid. That is like the first condition, without which without which there is no discussion at all with any of the sensitive organizations. So I think 3 things are happening parallelly.
Since there are no more questions, I think the lunch would be waiting for you. Oh, there's a question. You don't want them to have lunch? Okay. I mean, I think they would want you to ask.
Yeah, sorry, it will be a quick question. Basically, I also run an AI startup, and when you are talking about AI and ML, one of my crucial and I respect Commander Pujari comment. I mean, and we also take a help of lot of even housewives somewhere in Bihar and in some part of UP to annotate the data. So even like a lot of people who are not technically educated, they can change the way that you see the data. So we do take those helps. But now when I'm saying about AI and ML, now any AI ML technique or code comes with a trade-off. Okay, and when you are talking about trade-off, then man and AI, the interaction of human with the AI becomes very, very important. Just like just like any car engine, right? I mean, it may be designed, it may be had been researched by someone else somewhere in the lab, but in order to drive that thing, you have to spend time with that. You have to spend, the human part has to be there. So when you're talking about the data, and there are multiple ways when you can share the data. It's not about, so let's say you have a data of a signal, certain kind of signals, but you can find some similar analog data in some other systems, which may be something very, very similar to that kind of data. Like let's say you are looking on acoustic signal, you can have similar kind of music data. So even those problems, how we can, train using AI ML part, and even to train the person. So even large language model, when you talk about now, you can see the variety of answers. Like if you will put 5 people and how they will ask question, all 5 people will get different answers. Like, and how accurately you get the answer depend on the person who is asking the questions, right? So AI ML is like a sword, which has to be trained, which has to be, it's a, and that the real boundary between, the trade-offs which are there. So how do we, how any company which are trying to develop, how, these trade-offs and how we can address these trade-offs and how we can, understand the real stakeholder needs. Yeah.
You have a question?
Sorry,
Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you for your comment. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank my panelists, and I thank you all. I think we are set to go for lunch.
Thank you so much, everyone. Indeed, a captivating session. So before we go ahead into the lunch, can we have a group picture? I don't think you can come in front, so you just can go closer. Thank you very much. With this, we come to the end of the first session. We head into a lunch break and we'll resume for the second session sharp at 2:10. So the next session, see you at 2:10. Thank you so much.